We're live. Alrighty then. We are live. How's it going? Cruiser, you there, buddy?
Yeah, I'm here. Are people hearing us right now?
Yeah, they're hearing us.
Oh, okay. Well, here we go then. All right. Good morning, brownies! You never interrupt the call.
Alrighty then. Lead the way, Cruiser.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to Death of the Author Part 2, The Deathening. I'm your host, the Concert Cruiser, and I'm here with a couple of friends of mine. Oh, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Boo, get off the stage.
Excuse me, but I actually have talent.
Ooh, Caddy.
Thank you. But yeah, this is a topic that me and a couple of friends of mine have some interesting thoughts on, and they are here with us today. So I'd like to introduce you the guy who actually got me started here in the Brawny fandom, Mr. Brawny Buck.
Greetings, everyone. Yeah, that's generally how I feel about the situation, but what are you gonna do about it?
And also joining us, the person who actually kind of started this conversation, Mr. Silverquill.
And his obnoxious soundboard.
Oh, you think that's obnoxious? Just give me time.
Anyway, this is something that this is a topic that I have either mixed feelings about, or maybe I have a misunderstanding with, and I know Brawny does too. So we want to see if we can try to get to the bottom of this and see what are the pros and the cons of using Death of the Author. So with that being said, I have sort of this very blunt understanding of the topic. To my understanding, it's just interpreting someone else's work in your own way or your own thought. Brawny, what's your understanding of the topic?
Well, you put it in a very simplified manner. Something along the lines of what I would have said is that it doesn't necessarily matter what the author's intention for a piece was. Once they put it out into the world, it is subject to the interpretation of whoever is digesting that media. Be it a story, like a book, or a movie, or a cartoon, heck, a video game, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And Silver, are we entirely wrong here?
Well, I don't. The funny thing about this topic is that it's very much based on interpretation. So I don't know if it's ever accurate to say entirely wrong. You are wrong. Now hang your heads in shame.
So it doesn't matter what our understanding is. Is that what you're saying?
Well, here's what I'm saying. Picture in your minds for a moment the Grand Canyon. Mm-hmm. On one side of the canyon is the author, and on the other side is the audience. And the author is calling across his or her, their story, song, idea, you name it. The gap by which their message has to cross to reach the audience is the death of the author. It's where intention falls away, and basically the audience is going to decide their own reception, interpretation. And the thing is, the audience's reception is no less valid or no more valid than the author's intention and interpretation. And there is a lot of back and forth between parties about which one, how they view it. Some will carry better traction as they're better thought out or deeper insight or better articulated. But others will stick to their guns, and you can't control that. So don't take too much credit, but don't blame yourself too much either.
But do you ever think, though, some people will use Death of the Author to kind of justify their own way of thought? Because if you remember the video that I made about it, there was the rock star Tom Morello who took the song "School's Out" by another rock star, Alice Cooper, to mean about politics. And yeah, he did find a way to express himself politically. However, he is still misrepresenting a song. And don't you think that kind of shows a bit of disrespect to the author?
No, because because you can adapt that song to an idea. That is part of the flexibility and creativity of it. So if the original artist said, no, my song's not meant to do that, that's not necessarily a hard stop. Now here's the thing. There are times where people take their interpretation and try to say this is the only interpretation. Mm-hmm. This is the only way. That is not death of the author. That's being
I need to get a soundboard.
Oh, this isn't even a soundboard. It's just a little sound machine. And it's a little plastic case. It fits into my hand and has like 16 buttons. But here's the thing. I'm guessing whoever made this never said, that wasn't meant to be used on an online call. How dare you? How dare?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know what else you would use it for.
Brawny, I know I told you about that incident too with the two rock stars. How did you feel about that?
Here's the thing. You don't really have a whole lot of control over how people interpret your work once you put it out there. I think the bigger question is that whether or not people should think like that. So I tend to see two different camps when it comes to this concept of death of the author. It's either that whatever the author intended doesn't matter anymore because everybody's going to have their own interpretation of it, or some people think it means that that the audience might be thinking of things or ways to interpret a piece that the author themselves did not think of, and that adds more depth to the piece rather than taking away or changing the interpretation. I'm more of the camp that I don't think death of the author should be a thing. And it might be because of my upbringing. And, we have a saying, if the Proverbs can mean anything, then they can mean nothing. Then they really mean nothing. So like a biblical proverb is supposed to serve a very specific purpose and teach a very specific lesson, and you actually before you teach the proverbs have to go to school for a long time to make sure you're getting it right, because if you mess that up, that's a big deal. So given where I come from there, it's very important to know what the author's intention was for a song, a story, anything, in order to then interpret whether or not their message is applicable to the real world and practical in that sense. So what do you gentlemen think about that? Because that's my general stance on this concept.
Silver, you go first.
Well, listening to that, it actually sounds like the school to go over said proverbs and to teach is actually taking death of the author very seriously into account. There are ways to anticipate ways that a message can be misinterpreted or just misrepresented and try to account for that. You can't control how everyone will receive it, but you can do your best to account for as many variables as possible. And in doing so, you can become a better educator, orator, creator by being aware and I think in some ways that helps you understand the topic as well. How could this be misinterpreted? Now, the idea, I don't want to say that an author's intent does not matter. If anything, I find that is one of the many important factors. It's the story behind the story. Mm-hmm. What were they trying to teach? And then you can even do a study on, okay, how did this get misinterpreted? What could be done to clear that misinterpretation? So on and so forth. With the Proverbs, are people who really twist what is meant to be a positive message. I think you spend enough time around those people, you find that there's an agenda or a bias. And you realize that no matter what you say, they're going to interpret it a certain way because they want to. Now, while I am a big fan, I do encourage death of the author in that you are not limited or constrained by what one person says about their own work. It may inspire something different within you. You, at the same time, not all opinions are created equal. Some are better researched, better thought out, better articulated, less ego-driven. So there's a give and a take.
Indeed, because with the example that I brought up with these two rock stars, for those who don't know, Alice Cooper is someone who absolutely hates politics. He does not want them in his music at all. In fact, I don't even think he wants them in entertainment. However, the other guy, Tom Morello, is very politically driven. And for some guy who blatantly says, I want no part of this, and yet Tom is doing that, I find that to be a bit disrespectful. So that was, my kind of takeaway from all this. And when I actually met Alice, he said, I let him have his fun with that, but that is not what my song is about at all.
Of course you let him have his fun with it, because if you as the author take something that somebody said about your work and you attack it like that, then you're the jerk, right? But if you let people have their interpretations and someone gets it horribly wrong like that, then it's on them.
Hold on, I'm bringing him back. What happened there, Brawny?
I have no idea.
But anyway, finish your thought, Brawny.
Okay, what was the last thing we heard?
Of course, he let him have his fun with that.
Yeah, of course we let him have his fun with that, because if he were to try to attack, it was Rage Against the Machine, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, if Alice Cooper tried to attack Rage Against the Machine for that kind of thing, then he's the jerk. Because what he's doing now is he's suppressing or censoring an idea, which any artist should be appalled by that concept. But if Rage Against the Machine is screwing it up so bad, then that's on him. Do you sort of understand where I'm coming from with that? I feel like I'm rambling.
So basically, it's up to the audience to kind of realize, like, okay, maybe this guy is taking this the wrong way.
Yeah.
Or their agenda or their plans are skewing their interpretation, that there's an extra factor that's not present in other people.
Yeah, at the very least, it's the responsibility of the audience to, at the very least, have that conversation of whether or not something is being interpreted correctly. And another good conversation to have while analyzing a work is, did the author unintentionally have a deeper meaning to whatever it is they were trying to put out there? What do you guys think about that?
Oh, you're talking to my archetype fixation and my love of the collective unconsciousness, that even without being aware, we speak to the monomyth. We include messages of which we're not even conscious.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So let me ask you this one, Silver. If someone puts something into your work, and let's say he makes a very good point, but you never in your life thought about it during the process of writing and producing this, whatever it was. But you look at what he says and say, oh, that's a very good point. Is this point now a valid part of whatever you were trying to do? Or do you have to say, no, I didn't think about that, so it's not really in there? So what happens in that situation, in your opinion?
Well, first off, if someone said, no, I didn't really think about that, then I would firmly applaud their honesty. Because how many people, when being praised for this genius idea that they never entered their mind, they'd be like, oh yeah, I totally intended that. Yeah.
Good point.
They're out there, but they're a rare breed.
Well, praise be to that rare breed. I appreciate that honesty.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I think in that situation, you thank the good fortune. You are now aware of what that can mean, and what if you did that unconsciously. Now that you are conscious of it, what can you do? Can you follow up and turn the accident into a theme?
Interesting.
So the reason I asked that question is I actually had something similar happen to me a long time ago. Um, what was the year? I think it was 2013, and I had recently finished writing a film fiction of my own, and now the film fiction was a pretty basic story, and what I was trying to do was challenge myself to see if I could write a character that was a main character that was very opposite to me in personality from his perspective, and I wanted to try to write a good human in Equestria type story because those had and still do have a reputation of being very bad. And then so what happens is this guy, he goes to Equestria, but he only goes when he falls asleep, and he thinks he's dreaming, and but he's not really dreaming, and it's sort of like it's got this sort of Matrix vibe to it. But then he's not actually sleeping while he's in Equestria, so he starts going insane because he goes several days without sleeping. And as a result, he loses his girlfriend, he loses his job, and his life just gets very hard while he's awake on Earth. So somebody came up to me one time and said, "Is this story an allegory for what happens when you come out as a brony?" And the reason he thought that was because when he became a brony, it became a big. Initially, it was a big obsession for him. He just got way into it. He was one of those guys that just binged the first 3 seasons in a couple of days, and then he got in trouble with his family because they all thought he was weird for buying this merchandise, and his girlfriend thought he was weird, and he was performing less at his job because he was too busy staying up watching ponies at night when he should have been sleeping. And I was like, wait a sec, no, I didn't, that was not what I was going for. But now I got to consider what the heck I'm doing with this story. So like, what do you guys think about that?
Well, first off, with the girlfriend, that doesn't sound like that relationship was going to go very well.
No, probably
if that's
not.
All it takes.
Yeah.
So that may be a blessing in a very painful disguise. But okay, that's something very unique to that individual. Something that speaks to their moment in life that may not have been intended, but hey, it can work. It can form a connection, and that's part of what I love about storytelling. It can affect us in ways we never imagined.
But can that ever be bad, though?
Oh, always. It could always. Anything, too much of anything can become a vice. And yes,
go ahead, sorry.
I mean, I have 2 examples prepared for Death of the Author. One for when it's just painfully bad and frustrating, and one where it can actually net some positivity, although for others it may still feel bad.
I'd like to hear them, please.
It's like bad. Although I will preface that both of these involve getting a little political.
Do it. I love politics.
Oh, there we go. Well, who here remembers Kim Davis?
I actually don't remember Kim Davis, and now I feel like an idiot.
Your name sounds familiar.
You're not an idiot. If anything, I feel she's someone worth forgetting. She was a Kentucky clerk who refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't have a name for it, but I know who you're talking about now.
So, well, a judge sentenced her to jail for contempt of court. She was violating an order. Mm-hmm. And when she got out, they held this big rally, and they played Eye of the Tiger for her. And Survivor frontman Frankie Sullivan was, to say upset would be an understatement. Frankie was more like... And with good reason. He frankly said this, no, we did not grant Kim Davis any right to use my tune, The Eye of the Tiger. And he was very upset because he did not want his music linked with this person. He did not want his music used in support of this group, movement, or perspective. And he was absolutely furious that they had done this without even asking.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's where Death of the Author becomes very bitter.
Okay.
People are going to misappropriate that song for different venues, events a lot. It's popular, it's well known, it's catchy as can be, and it's meant to be empowering. It's 80s power music I think is the category.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing in the song says this should only be played in this context for this political mindset for this group. And so I think by Death of the Author, you can't really say hands off my music associated with yours. Unfortunately, we don't have that level of control. Now, Frankie Sullivan does, however, have legal rights. They did not pay him for this. They did not request. He had every right as a content creator to deny them the rights to play this at this gathering. And he rightly pursued legal action. And there was a very sizable settlement out of court.
Oh, wow.
But, and we're entering an election period. I have no idea how it's going to play out with all that's going on. But people are going to do this again. It happens every political event. Someone uses a song and doesn't realize that you need 2 sets of permissions, or they don't ask for permission at all. So there's a legal world and there's the Death of the Author. Sometimes they align, sometimes they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example where I feel for Frankie, having your music linked with such an event, if you disagree with someone politically, if this is something fundamental to your sense of self, I have nothing but sympathy for how upsetting it is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, finish what you're saying.
At the same time, I have to say I can't support saying, oh, if the author doesn't want you to do this, then you shouldn't say it, because that shuts down a lot of other avenues of expression with which I would agree. It's called a chilling effect.
Mm-hmm.
And, Thomas Kant and the categorical imperative. If you're going to do something, make sure you be willing to make it a universal law.
I'll definitely give you props for sticking with your guns on that one.
Well, it's not...
Well, making something a universal law comes with its own set of problems, because things need to get treated on a case-by-case scenario. If you try to paint the world in black and whites like that, then you're gonna lose people that you don't need to lose.
Hey, Brawny, I think I know what's going wrong here. You're not on push to talk, so you're not technically being active.
Okay.
Let me see if I can fix that. If not, maybe use push to talk, or I'll just have to keep bringing.
Okay, that's weird. I'll fix that on my end. Anyway, so while I'm fixing that, what was I saying? Someone tell me the last thing that came out of my mouth. Lost my train of thought.
I just mentioned that I threw up in my mouth a little for having defended Death of the Author, even in a situation where I don't agree with it.
Right. Well, in the case of Survivor, like if I had been in Survivor's shoes, and we'll say that I hated this idea, that my music was used in this context, I would have to sit back and look in and go, okay, so at which point in time does Eye of the Tiger say, Eye of the Tiger is rising up to the challenge of our rival. The challenge of our rival is going to mean something completely different to somebody else. When I used to compete, Eye of the Tiger was one of the most common, like getting into the ring songs that would play as people are coming down the aisle to get into the ring. It got really interesting when both of the competitors wanted to play that song. So you got things like that. So it's gonna, for when I was competing, that was my rival. If I want to have 250,000 subscribers, then Silver Quill becomes my rival, right? Because he's got more than me and I got to get more than him. Or if I'm taking on a public institution that I have religious qualms with, the public institution is now my rival. As Survivor, I'd have to sit back and go, well, I don't like that person, but they're not wrong, and then that plays into coming down and the author themselves coming down to suppress an idea through the legal method in this case, rather than allowing the conversation to take place, which I think is a despicable concept.
Mm-hmm. Is there ever a time where the author themselves is at fault, Silver? Because I guess to make one example, when the September 11th attacks happened, I think it was the FCC made a list of a bunch of songs that they pulled from the radio, some more understandable than others. One of them, however, was the song Holy Diver by Ronnie James Dio. And when Ronnie asked why, he was told that, well, on the cover of it, you have a demon killing a priest. And Ronnie said he actually planned it so that you didn't know if it was the demon killing the priest or the priest killing the demon. So do you think he's at fault for being vague about it?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
I wouldn't fault him for being vague, but at the same time, then I wouldn't fault people for realizing this could cause a great deal of emotional damage and trauma at a time where we are, as a nation, we're already traumatized. So I won't fault that person for being vague, but I will say, look, with that vagueness in mind, it is the safer move to look out for people's emotional well-being. Your song will get back on the air, just not right now.
Brawny, your thoughts?
Well, if you leave something open to interpretation like that, like, okay, so it would have been easier to say the priest and the demon were killing each other to symbolize the eternal struggle of good versus evil and the need for balance in the world, right? It would have been very easy to say that. And I haven't seen this album cover myself, but maybe it's easy to see that to somebody who's got a half a brain, and maybe it's not easy to see. But that's the thing, though. That's what I keep saying is once you put something out there, how people are going to interpret it is up to them, and whether or not their interpretation is accurate is a different story, and that's the conversation that we should be having about it, and that's why it's important to let those ideas go rather than try to censor them. But if you purposefully make things vague, then whatever happens is on you, in my opinion. Well, at the very least, you can't get upset when people misinterpret your message. And in the event that someone puts something out there for the purpose of being vague, now this is one of the biggest caveats to Death of the Author that I can think of, is I'm going to put this thing out there, and it's meant to be vague. I want it to be vague because I'm not trying to deliver a message. I'm trying to start a conversation that can go either way, and I want there to be balance. So I want there to be no heroes. I want there to what's a good example that just came to my head as I was thinking this, the Lorax. We've all read the Lorax, right? Like the original Dr. Seuss one. We didn't see the freaking movie. So when you get, in the Lorax, they're like, you're doing this to the environment, and the guy that's running the business says, well, what am I supposed to do? How are these people going to get these tools that they need from the environment? And do you want me to put all these people out of work? And it's one of those things where it's like they're for a very specific reason is no right answer. And the fact that there is no explicit message is the message itself. But going back to what I was originally saying, when that happens and people come at it with whatever the heck they want, and suddenly the proverbs mean nothing because the proverbs can mean anything, that's when you just got to say, okay, yeah, this is what I asked for. This is the consequences of my actions as the author. What do you gentlemen think?
That actually sounds rather fair. Silver, what do you think?
Well, if it's intentionally vague, then yeah, you're inviting multiple interpretations. At the same time, I think there's still a responsibility in the audience that if it is left vague, put out your interpretation, but do you use that interpretation to then attack the creator? Because that's where I think Death of the Author stops and you are becoming a genuinely terrible person.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you there's very few circumstances in which case you should attack the author, and attacking the author can also mean a few different things there that you want to be careful of. Are we attacking the author's points, or are we deplatforming the author, right? Because like I said, I'm very against the idea of censorship. I would rather in a way, I guess, the author to censor themselves through getting disproven. If you lose a fight, you're less likely to try to fight again. But if you feel like the opponent cheated, then you're going to be more likely to fight even harder because now you feel like a victim of some kind. So the question of attacking an author comes with a few other questions itself before we can get down to whether or not that's a good idea. So Silver, what do you think about that?
Well, in fact, my other example of where I think Death of the Author was actually more of a positive might tie into this.
All right,
Okay.
Go for it.
All right, who here has heard of the new guy memes?
The new guy memes?
Yes.
I probably know it, but not by name.
Alrighty. Well, then here's a quick summation.
Okay.
December 2nd, 2019, which feels very, very long ago. PewDiePie, his home got robbed.
Ooh.
And people had mixed reactions. Some expressed sympathy, some took a little schadenfreude from it. One artist, Mallory Jessica Odysseus, published a comic where a purple-haired character, possibly meant to represent the artist, basically was laughing about it and saying, this is so funny. And a coworker whose name tag says new guy, and he's a tall, bald, stocky fellow, looks a little on the dim side, says, hey, how would you feel if you were robbed? The character says, oh, wow, I can tell that you're going to be the kind of coworkers who become good friends. New guy says, wow, really? Character says, hell no. And that was supposedly the end of it. But a lot of people read the comic and actually agreed more with the new guy. And so there was this wave of artwork in which the new guy was... he didn't really connect with that character, but other coworkers were really drawn to him, or people really celebrated his empathy.
I think we lost Silver. Oh, no, it was me that was lost. Okay, so people lost empathy for this, and then what happened?
Well, no, they had great empathy for the new guy and celebrated it, and it became a huge white wave of memes in a very short amount of period. Mm-hmm. Now, in a lot of ways, I celebrate this because I think the goal, I am trying to discern the author's intent in that this seemed to be a dismissal of anyone who expressed empathy, or to say that it was rather stupid to express any support for PewDiePie.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't strictly agree with that, though I understand why one would feel that way. PewDiePie is a whole other package to unpack.
Well, yeah, because PewDiePie has had his controversies in the past, so some people like him, some people don't like him, and some people think that just because he's, got a relatively large amount of money when compared to 99.99999% of other YouTubers, that he deserves to have things like that happen. And so now it gets into moral quandaries of what did PewDiePie do to deserve getting robbed, which is a heck of a conversation to have. It sounded, now I'm actually not familiar with this meme. I didn't follow the PewDiePie thing at all. I don't care. But I'm definitely against the idea of somebody getting robbed, especially someone getting robbed just because they have more than you, or getting robbed because they did something that you disagreed with, and to promote that level of violence is not something that we should do in civilized society. But the person who made that comic seems to think that it was just a universal truth that everyone would agree with, whoever it was made this comic. Go ahead.
Or that perhaps only the smart people would agree.
Right.
Again, we are in treacherous waters as we're trying to guess the intent of the artist. Now, I will say that there is a counter view on this. I love that people rallied around a symbol of positivity, empathy, and kindness. Even if I imagine a lot of those people did not like PewDiePie for his behavior, but they still understood the idea of no one deserves to have that happen.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that's the case, because to kind of give one example of something that's kind of similar to this, or at least I guess laughing at someone else's expenses, there was the Fire Festival incident that happened, and how a bunch of a lot of people were laughing at these rich white kids who were stranded on a island in the Bahamas. And while I get the joke, that's still someone's kids here, man.
And not only that, they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. They got scammed
pretty badly.
Right.
Yeah. So Silver, I'm sorry. What were you about to say?
Well, there's a flip side to this outpouring of people creating works where they agreed more with the antagonist of the piece rather than the protagonist. A lot of people were saying that these arts were used to attack the author, that in providing a counterpoint, they overwhelmed the artist with sort of this steady stream of counter views, which the internet has a way of amplifying that. You're one person and many people are shouting at you. And I have not seen all the new guy memes, but by law of the internet, some of them were likely not kind. If anything, probably a little hypocritical in advocating kindness by insulting or assaulting a person's sense of self.
Yeah, which is unfortunately very common. But that's what we as a society have to tackle and sort of learn to rise above that type of retaliation with violence to an idea. You got to have the conversation and dismantle the idea from a logical perspective. Violence is only justified when you have been attacked in self-defense, rather.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this, Silver, because I remember this quote that Brawny said in his podcast, and that's when something can mean anything, doesn't it now mean nothing?
Well, first off, I've never seen a story. Here's the funny thing. A story that could mean anything and still be coherent would undo all of fiction, because then there would never be a need to make anything more. Every story is, in a sense, contained within certain parameters. If anyone tried to say that Proverbs was predicting an alien invasion, I think they might have a few screws loose.
Yeah, I would agree.
I'm going with a rather absurdist example, of course.
Yeah.
But so the idea that one story can mean anything is itself an exaggeration. Mm-hmm. A story, however, can try to get a certain point across, and within the purview of that topic or context, or perhaps something tangentially linked, then it can take on a multitude of meanings. You can aim for one. In fact, I think really good writers do aim for one. But that doesn't mean that the wind won't kick up and knock the message off course. The arrow might not hit its mark.
So I think it's more in terms of attacking an author. If we dismantle the idea that the author put forth, then that can be a good thing, because then we put out into the collective unconscious, or the collective, we put out into society, if we put out into our culture, that there are lines to what you can put out there before you take some sort of consequence for the ideas that you're putting forward. If we correctly interpret that you are calling for violence when you're not, when violence would not be justified, then, and thousands of people say the society has judged you and found you lacking for these reasons, and kind of get shouted down into like choosing to step down from whatever negative platform they were putting forth, and that's a lot better than attacking in turn. Is the point that I was ultimately trying to make with what you were talking about there, Silver.
I guess my chief concern there is that not everyone who gets shouted down deserves it. The civil rights movement would have gotten shot. Imagine putting that in modern day context with social media. How quickly people would get shouted down even though they shouldn't step down. It's a very hard call to make when someone is saying things that people don't want to hear versus things that are not right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I'm not sure shouting them off the platform is the way to go, but at the same time, it's also a question: do you give this person the attention they seek with this message?
And I don't mean shouting down in terms of somebody more people come in with bullhorns where you only had your were one person with your voice. I mean like talking like we are right now, and when through logical civilized conversation we deconstruct each other's points, and we have the ability to logically and civilly and calmly show why you're wrong, and then give you an opportunity to better yourself rather than deplatforming you or censoring you or shouting you down too harshly, because then that turns you into a vindictive victim, is what that ends up doing. So does what I was saying make any more sense now?
That does. That's an important part. Although I think there are also times where a person is putting forth something shocking or awful just for the attention, because by people trying to counter, they are giving that individual free advertising. And
that's our responsibility as a society, to be able to identify those trolls and deal with and just ignore them, because that's how a troll gets their power, is through giving them attention.
Yeah, that's kind of the sad thing of something like this, when you can tell someone's wrong and you have all the evidence to back you up, but all you're doing is just giving them more attention.
Yep. When the only winning move is not to play.
Pretty much. But anyway, Silver, with some stories, I think it's the author has their intentions clear, but is there ever a moment where the author's very own interpretation could be wrong?
Oh, yes.
Ooh, that's
okay, please explain.
Now we're getting into the meat of it now. I've been waiting for this. Let's hear it, Silver. Okay, without orgasming into the microphone, please.
That was my dear. That's my ragegasm.
Oh God, the implications.
All right, that'll be 50 cents for the royalties, Cruiser.
Okay.
All right, let's hear it.
All right.
Please.
There's this. I'm not going to say the book's name because I just talked about not giving free press to a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
There was a science fiction series where aliens invade, and the counter is to use a euthaning process to take war veterans and restore them to their fighting peak. That included several Nazi officers and soldiers. SS. Now, funny enough, the author in their notes admit that they did this simply for shock value. This is why I point them out. But they say, oh, all the people who were in charge are dead. So, no, it's done. It's like, that is not the end of the story. How could you even say that's the end? And, it threw at dismissives of, everyone killed prisoners in that war. Or somehow when a Jewish person is hostile towards these officers, and the book tries to present that individual is the one with the attitude problem. I flipped through that at a bookstore, and I had seen a mention of it online just to see for myself. I was like, no, this is wrong on so many. I can't even believe that someone thought this would be accepted without resistance. I genuinely think it was a ploy simply to get people to read the book. And I consider that wrong on multiple levels.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, because then, I can understand wanting shock value to bring something in, but once you get the people in, have some gosh darn substance. Otherwise, you just kind of a scam artist, and I got no respect for scam artists. Is that about what you're getting at here, Silver?
Having refused to read the series in and of itself, I don't know. I can't really honestly speak to the quality. But if that is what they needed to get people to read, I don't think it's a reach to say there isn't much there to stand on its own.
Now, let me ask you this, Silver. If somebody does that, are they more of an artist or less of an artist? Because if the way I generally understand art of any kind is that it's being made to elicit a response of some kind, either intellectual or emotional, out of the audience. So if they do that with the malicious intentions? I roped you in, and it proved a point that you would only read this out of rage, or does it say more to their lack of skill as an artist that they need to resort to something like that in order to get any kind of audience at all? What do you think in that situation?
In this situation, I think it speaks to being a lack of an artist. Art, in my eyes, is something that comes from within. Actually, I will provide a counter view that was equally shocking but much more genuine. At the art museum, actually in multiple art museums across the country, but this was like 2 years ago, there's a display of rainbow-colored thread strung very taut in these elaborate structures, and it's quite beautiful. Now, the descriptor of the artist, who's from used threads, and while I was there with a friend, I asked, why is that controversial? Because it's rainbow themed? And it turned out, as a person supervising the exhibit said, in Mexico, men do not work with threads like that. That is a female assigned role. To even use this as a medium is shocking, possibly confrontational. But it's something from within. He's not looking to antagonize to get you to pay attention. He's putting this out there, showing what he can do with this material that is considered taboo. I feel that's coming from within, from a creative expression, whereas this book that is trying to shock you to make you read it is just sound and fury, but no substance. It's not coming from within, unless this person really is trying to say, hey, those SS officers weren't that bad.
Okay, I think I can draw a more popular parallel to the point that you're making here. Ghostbusters 2016.
I can hear.
Why are you booing me? I'm right.
Go on, Brawny.
No, that sounds like Ghostbusters 2016 was loud, and it was poorly written, and it was very bad, and everyone involved with it could only defend their work by calling everybody who didn't like it sexist, regardless of the gender of the person critiquing it, or racist, regardless of the race of the person critiquing it. So you get that kind of thing going on. That's what like, while Silver was describing this book, the more he got into it, the more I was thinking Ghostbusters 2016, Ghostbusters 2016, Star Wars, Rise of Skywalker. It just things like that. How far off am I, gentlemen?
Silver, you're the expert here.
Oh, I don't know about expert. I
don't know about expert either.
Yeah, but I can see what you're saying. That I guess with. Oh, excuse me. I don't know what they were aiming for when they started. I guess that's the big question. I understand? Yes, it is a very poor defense to try and vilify your opposition instead of addressing the points. And I did not laugh at Ghostbusters. I didn't have.
Yeah, I saw your without context video.
So I'm in very much agreement that it was not as enjoyable a movie. It was just there. It wasn't offensively bad, but it wasn't anything that lived up to the title.
It just existed.
It existed, and trying to slander everyone who has a poor opinion on it is a very poor, disgraceful mood and approach. I don't know if I guess because they're not trying to be intentionally insulting with the movie. I don't know if I regard with the same rancor as I do this book series.
Yeah, just see, one of the things that I've seen in the arts world, and stuff like this is bound to be expected with artsy fartsy folks. There was a performance piece where some woman actually stripped naked, bathed herself in honey while doing BDSM and reciting Winnie the Pooh. And I'm reading this, going, how is this art? This isn't art. This isn't even entertainment. This is just stupid.
Yeah. Certainly.
Isn't that movie Sorry for Bothering You?
Don't believe so. I actually heard this performance from Owen Citizen from Brows Held High.
Sounds like a third-hand source there, and by the time you get into 3 degrees of separation like that, it's very possible something got very lost in the translation. So, I think at the risk of the implications of what I'm about to say here, given what we were just talking about, it sounds like more research might need to be done.
Well, my point is that I have to wonder, like, is this actually art, or is this woman just going for shock value?
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about earlier. So here's a curious question for Silver. That book series you were talking about, how long was the book series, and how long was each book?
Well, each book is a pretty standard size. I don't have a word count handy. As near as I can tell, this book about bringing back SS soldiers and officers was like 5th or 6th in the series. Maybe it was just an attempt to revitalize it or get more attention as it was tapering off.
And so it sounds like you came in the middle when there's a whole bunch of stuff that happened in the beginning and probably at the end that may vastly change the meaning of this story. So like you took it sounds like you took a Hobbit-sized excerpt out of the out of the Goblet of Fire, when there was 3 books before that and 3 books after that were gigantic. You know what I mean?
Well, seeing these books on the shelf together, they're not gigantic. They're pretty standard. And I did actually try to read the first book in the series to try to get a understanding, but yeah, it did not grip at all. It was not. This was, in my eyes, this was a series that was just alien invasion, sound and spectacle. Isn't this cool? Oh, hey, we'll do something edgy.
Oh, I see. So yeah, anything
is true
could...
that it was later in the series, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that it had a strong start.
Okay, so I think the most important question here is, in all these examples that we've pulled today, how many people have asked the author what they were trying to do?
Yeah, because that's one thing I want to try to give some respect to the author here, because it's their work. I think they should have a say in what it is or what it's supposed to be.
Because it's not until we know what they were trying to do that we can accurately judge their message.
Well, in the case of this book, of which I am so vehement against, the author literally said in the author's notes, "Yeah, we're trying to shock you."
At least he admitted it.
Well, that's certainly a clue in the right direction. Then
he also said, "Everyone responsible for that is dead, so get over it." And I'm like, "Nope."
Oh
nope,
yeah, that is the mating call of someone who's that is the mating call of a troll. So let me interrupt here for a little bit. Cruiser, did you set this panel for an hour or an hour and a half?
To be honest, it didn't ask me for how long the panel was
going
to be.
Well, we've been at it for yeah.
I was going to say, on the schedule it's set for an hour, but by all means, this is not we don't have to give up the room to anyone, so please feel free.
Okay, so I was just going to ask how long you wanted to go. We've been at it for 56 minutes in 3, 2, 1. Did you want to go to any other... did you have any other sections or topics planned, Cruiser, or did you want to talk to the audience at all? I just want to know what you wanted to do with your panel before we ramble on for another hour.
I just wanted to ask a couple of other questions of how my understanding of the topic came to be, and just kind of get both of your thoughts on this, and the audience can hear your thoughts on it, essentially.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, there was one incident that happened between me and a friend of mine that got pretty heated over the episode Fame and Misfortune, and this actually might even explain what could quite possibly be my lack of understanding of Death of the Author. And one of the things he said was, have you ever heard of Death of the Author? Yeah, I have. And he said to me, if they didn't want me to have those thoughts, they should have been more specific. Now, my response to him was, or maybe you could be a better judge of character. So,
shots fired.
So in that case, is it quite possibly that this friend of mine is at fault here, because he may have had this misunderstanding of what Death of the Author meant, or maybe what that particular episode meant?
I never want to... Actually, I shouldn't say never. I very rarely want to fault someone for having certain thoughts. I mean, okay, having thoughts is not a crime.
No, it's not. But if you think back to in the video that I made, I brought up Tipper Gore and the PMRC and that rock star Dee Snider, and how Tipper Gore said that this song of yours, Under the Blade, was about sadomasochism and bondage, and there was that whole ordeal with the U.S. Senate. And turns out, no, that's never what it was. So she went in there judging the person who came up with this and had the completely wrong idea. And so maybe the issue is maybe Tipper needs to be a better judge of character, much like this friend of mine should have been.
Well, and being too specific can take away from the emotional impact of the story that you're trying to tell. Like, I could put it this way, I could come into a room full of people and go, drugs are bad, okay, don't do drugs because they're bad, and if you do drugs then you're bad, right? And then I could just leave on that note. And if the DARE program is anything to go by, 3/4 of them kids are going to go, well, why? Maybe I should try some drugs and find out why they are so bad. Or I could come in and I could say, like, listen, I've had several I've had several family members that got into drugs. This is, this is what it did to their body. This is what it did to their mind. This is what it did to the rest of my family. And I can tell very explicit stories and never say the word drugs are bad, something early on as simple as, things started taking a turn for the worse. Like it started with cigarettes, and then he got into coke, and then he got into meth, and at each point things just keep getting worse and worse, and that might have a more personal, emotional impact to the audience of okay, I don't want to become that. I don't want to become that character in the story that started with something innocuous and went way too far down the rabbit hole. So how do I avoid getting into that? It might have, at least I think from a psychological aspect, I have a better chance of having that effect on my audience through a story. And at no point in time did I go, drugs are bad, okay? Do you guys see what I'm getting at here?
Mm-hmm.
And any disagreements? I feel like I rambled.
Yeah, because I kind of lost you there.
All right, so what are we? Where's the disconnect of what I'm saying?
Drugs are bad.
Basically, I think you're saying that if you're overly specific, you actually trying to narrow the message to such a finite point, you actually lose your audience and possibly give the wrong message comes across.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
essentially what I'm getting at. So Cruiser, what do you think about that? We haven't heard very much from you this panel.
Well, I mainly am listening here because it seems like that I had just this wrong impression of what Death of the Author is. So I'm just trying to listen and get a better understanding of what this means. Because this, like I said, this incident with this friend of mine, it did get heated, and everything is fine between the two of us. In fact, it became a very bittersweet moment. But it just surprised me how I have to use the word again, heated things could get when there is not when the truth is not actually heard from the author.
Well, it's kind of funny in the case of dang it, you said the title and I'm blanking on
Fame and Misfortune.
Yeah, Mitch Larson basically renounced that story on his own. Even the author doesn't back it.
Well, actually, I interviewed him, and he never actually said that he denounced the episode. He just didn't like it. And when I interviewed him and some of the other writers, Confalone, who said there's this myth that we like everything that has our name on it or everything that we've written, when that's not the case. So there's definitely instances where they came out with episodes where fans have liked, even though the author themselves didn't care for it. This doesn't necessarily make them bad episodes, but it's, they were met with I guess you could say, be it from like Hasbro or the Running Time.
Well, Death of the Author and My Little Pony has certainly been very proactive for us, right down to our beloved Muffin Mare, an animation error that became a sweeping sensation. And it's actually kind of funny that episode, Fame and Misfortune in particular, highlights the pros and cons of Death of the Author. You got
interesting.
He's right though. Yeah, let's hear this one, Silver.
Please.
Twilight puts this journal of friendship out, thinking that it'll teach lessons and get everyone on the same page. And lo and behold, people instead compare which character they like best, which stories make the most sense, which seems believable. They kind of pick it apart. So it was not what she intended, and she was understandably frustrated.
I liked Twilight better before she had wings.
Funny story. I actually went to an M.A. Larson roasting panel at BronyCon, the last one, and turns out Jason Thiessen, he begged Hasbro not to give her wings.
Yeah, I've heard that story as well. But go, I think we interrupted Silver.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, it's all good. Well, it's kind of funny looking back on it. I'm very glad that then Frenemies had an older male pony learning the lessons from Twilight. Granted, he was in seclusion in the worst guard post in all the world, but that was a neat little follow-up to sort of dull the edge. One thing, but if we're talking about what the author intends or what the story is supposed to do versus how it's received, there's one point that I always come back to. One of the things Mitch talked about, I think this was at Nightmare Nights, is that he was just like, why am I making all these background characters so awful or so unintentionally hurtful? And I thought about it because a lot of this was Ponyville residents, characters that the fandom, in a death of the author scenario, has adopted and developed their own ideas or backstories for. And they're being portrayed very negatively. How much would that episode's reception have changed if all the characters who were the negative voice of a fandom were brand new designs we'd never seen before?
Oh, there'd be torches and pitchforks.
Against those characters, but would they be against the story?
I'm not sure, because while we've seen a lot of background characters and a lot of us have come up with our own interpretations of them, I have to say a lot of them that we saw, or at least got screen time, like the camera was perfectly poised on them, those I didn't really recognize. Like I remember seeing one green pony who was intimidating Fluttershy, and he finds out that she's a lot different from the way she is in the book, and he doesn't know how he feels about that. That pony I've never seen before.
It's true, and actually, when that pony came out, I was like, that's me. That's what I'm like. They do something I didn't expect that I don't know how to feel. I'm so confused.
Not to mention, he only had like 2 horseshoes on his hind hooves. They look like weird versions of sandals.
But then what about all the ponies who are laughing at Pinky and thinking everything she says is by default hilarious? Those are characters from Ponyville. And if we look at the crowd gathering around Twilight's Castle at the quote-unquote climax, it is, again, it's a mixture of old and new. Plus, yeah, it's Caramel saying, are Pinkie Pie and Applejack related or what? And I see Lyra and Bonbon in there.
Them I didn't see. I'm going to have to go back and look.
Yep, and I'm looking at the gallery on the MLP wiki, and I see Lemon Hearts, and dang it, my friend's, what's her name? Rainbow Chaser, Pegasus we've seen in past episodes. There's Lotus Blossom. Hello, Lotus. So there's a mix of characters we know and characters we don't know in that crowd. And I use the term characters somewhat loosely, as very often fans have provided more personality than the show. Yes,
indeed.
Well, that might also ask the question of, is this more about people treating you differently that they've seen now that they've seen this side of you, or perceive you as famous, right? Because there's not all of my friends know everything about me, and they probably would think differently about me if they knew some stuff that they don't know. And that might have been what we were seeing in Ponyville. So it could have been, it's like, imagine Granny Smith reading this book and going, my daughter did what? Or my granddaughter did what? kind of thing. So that's what that looked like to me. But what were you saying, Cruiser?
Just thinking back to what Larson said in the interview that we did with him, and how his big issue was that nobody was really learning a lesson in that episode. It wasn't the town's ponies. It wasn't the girls. It was really no one. And he said if the episode ended with the town's ponies realizing that they were being jerks, he would have been okay with it. But obviously they didn't learn anything, and I understand why they went with that ending because, yeah, this is how fandoms are. In fact, when I met Katrina Hadley, one of the producers, that's what she told me. She said all fandoms are like this. It's not just Pony. It's Whovians. It's Star Wars. It's Trekkies. It's Ringers. This isn't something that's exclusive to us. So I understand why they went with that ending.
And yeah,
I actually don't agree with him saying that no one learned a lesson. I think the main six learned something. The two Phillies learned something.
Mm-hmm. And that was I guess speaking of those two Phillies, because I guess this could technically count as Death of the Author. I'm not sure. The one thing that my friend said about those two Phillies is that it was the show saying that this was really intended for kids. They're gonna get it. The bronies won't. However, the way I saw it was, who's to say those two Phillies cannot represent someone like me? Someone who doesn't get bent out of shape when the show does something that I don't approve of.
No, I think you can identify with them very nicely.
Yeah,
Gee,
and that may... Go ahead.
Sorry, may I interject for just... I know I'm not part of the panel, really, but you had me thinking really hard here about the Death of the Author thing, and especially with a show like MLP, which has so many different writers, you know, working off each other's stories and trying not to contradict and backpedal. But there are some episodes that do this in such a terrible way, like Cart Before the Ponies, where basically the three main six characters in a Rainbow, Apple, and Rarity completely forget every lesson they've ever learned.
They got caught up in the moment, I will say, yes.
Yeah, like is that like you know, when there's multiple authors, is that something that probably happens more?
Oh yes, communication, especially when we're in a day and age where you're not even working in the same building.
Yeah, in fact, I think the writers have even said they don't gather in a room and talk with each other about writing an episode. It's actually one person, you know, writing the script. They may call each other up to get some insight or maybe a little bit of help, but it's not a bunch of people in one room typing up a script.
Yeah, because I would never really say I hate an episode of MLP, but I hate that episode.
And before we continue, the people in the YouTube chat, if you have a question, go ahead and start typing it, and we will get to some questions from you guys. When it came to that episode, I thought it was kind of cute, to be honest with you. It's definitely a trope I've seen before. And I will say that the one thing that does save it is the fact, from being terrible, is just the fact that this does happen in real life.
Yeah.
So I can't, say it's outright terrible, but it did get a little close to being too out of character.
Yeah. I guess I should rephrase a little bit, saying I hate the episode in context with the series. On its own, it's not a terrible episode, but when you put it with all the others, it just takes away so much of all the previous episodes.
But all this brings us right back to, the original question that I asked at the very beginning of the stream is, who are we asking the authors the right question? So, Cruiser, let me ask you this. You remember, I think it was Grand Brony Gala 2, when we had Dave Polsky come over, and you wanted to ask him a question about Daring Do, or Daring Don't, whatever it was. And like, I can't remember what the question was, but you came up to me and asked me if it was an appropriate question, and I ended up rephrasing the question from top to bottom for you to make it, I think, if I remember correctly, and I knew it wasn't your intention, but the way you worded it sounded accusatory. And I said, okay, if you word it like that, it's going to sound accusatory of the writer. If you word it like this, you're going to get more of what Polsky was trying to convey for clarification. Do you happen to remember what I'm talking about?
I think so. I think it may have been about the episode Equestria Games, because that was somewhat of a controversial episode. Silver, I know you, Voice of Reason, and some other people did a video on that. Because I guess there was this big build up to it. It's going to be this big, huge, epic moment in the season, when it just turned out to be a Spike episode. And I even remember Tommy Oliver releasing a video saying how much he hated that episode. And I believe it was Dave, both Dave and Voice of Reason actually had kind of the same response to it, which was, what were you really expecting? Because you only had connection to one game out of that entire event. None of the other ponies were playing. It was just Rainbow and Fluttershy, and they were just competing in a race. So
you mean Applejack?
Applejack did not compete in the games. Her
sorry.
sister, Apple Bloom was a flag waver, but Applejack did not compete in the games itself.
So it was Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy were part of the relay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what happened?
He actually gave a pretty good response, which is of course, you're not going to please everyone, and that did surprise him a little bit, because again, there was only connection to one of the events, and it seemed like some people misinterpreted that as there was going to be this big, huge episode, when again it was just a Spike episode.
Just a Spike episode. I love that phrasing.
Somewhere I can hear Kathy Westlook having a conniption. Just a Spike episode? Not really.
Oh, we loved Kathy. She was actually the very first guest we ever had at that convention.
Yeah, Kathy's a great person. So did you have any other questions for us, Cruiser, or should we turn to the audience?
Let me quickly go over my notes here.
Quicksilver, while he's distracted, let's talk trash about him behind his back. Did you notice how he's got a mare design OC? Who does that? He's back. He's back. We gotta shut up.
Oh
no. Is it possible that people are looking for answers that aren't actually there, and can it be harmful?
Yes. Just hard for me. That's a hard stop. Just yes. And we've given a few examples throughout earlier this stream of how that is true. But what were you saying, Silver?
I'm just musing aloud, because sometimes you see an answer even though it's not at all related, and it can actually be positive. But yes, it can be negative as well, especially if it's more affirming your own bias rather than the truth. Just because you found an answer doesn't mean it's the right one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because sometimes I think people are just looking for ways to justify their own way of thinking. When, as you said, that's not really death of the author. That's just you being cuckoo.
They calling back to Brotherhood Social and the litany of fan theories that were coming out. It was with that episode, Big Macintosh is trans, and I'm like, you guys are nuts.
He's just a cross-dresser.
in a very specific context, yes. I mean, we certainly cannot deny that he cross-dressed in that episode.
Oh, now come on, he did turn into Princess Big Mac in his dream. That was his dream.
He turned into an alicorn. I don't know if he adopted a feminine.
Fair enough.
And not to mention, I'm not directing my dreams here. I'm pretty sure no one is.
Oh, but in that episode they were.
Right. So, but that's why it's such a hard stop for me, is because we've already spent the last hour and 18 minutes talking about this, and and I've brought up a few different ways it can be harmful, and you get things like that going on. Is sometimes the people in their interpretation. So just very simply, yes, I think it can be harmful, and I think they look for things that aren't there.
Okay, Silver.
I think we're in agreement on this one. While I celebrate when a book can provide an insight that helps improve people, intentional or not, there's just as many opportunities for someone to affirm the wrong message, or to to confirm their own bias, and in doing so only make things harder for themselves in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
It's why I think it's important to ask yourself, how could this be misinterpreted?
Yep.
Okay.
And you're never going to be able to account for everything, because even like as crazy as what I just said was, I also remember seeing 3 people whose names I don't remember, but I do remember counting 3 different examples of people saying that Friendship is Magic was transphobic because Big Mac cross-dressed, and I was like, what?
Yeah. I remember seeing people
Right,
like
so you get things like that happening, and that's when you just kind of gotta go, okay, people can people are wacky sometimes, and you move on.
So I got to ask. I didn't actually know this happened. People were saying that because of that, MLP was transphobic.
I counted 3 people saying something right along those lines back when that episode aired, and it was on Twitter, so we don't really take Twitter seriously.
Oh, we're promoting this thing. That means we hate it.
I mean, even if it was, it's just such a thing to unravel, and it's so wrong on so many levels. But yeah, that's what's up.
Okay, we do have a question here from Solus X. He says, "Is it strange to think why it isn't necessary to separate the author from their work? Like, why should we deny the experience and effect of the author on their work?"
Ooh, yeah, that's an interesting question. So should we separate the author from their work?
I think we have to.
Yeah, sometimes, because Queen has amazing music.
Oh yes.
I'd probably have a great deal of political disagreements with all of the artists in that band.
Mm-hmm.
And then it, like, if I can be that prick that keeps bringing up his own work, like back when I was talking about how I wrote that film fiction earlier, my goal was to write a main character while I was writing that main character, I went, okay, what would I do in this situation? And then as I wrote the story, the character of Steven did the exact opposite of what I would do myself. So that's definitely a disconnect of myself and the artist. But then, when I make something like a buck to the face or moral of the story, that is literally me putting myself into the work. So it's case by case scenario. You have to have the ability to separate art from the artist, but it's not always necessary to separate the art from the artist. What do you think, Silver?
Well, I'm sort of flashing back. I was thinking through some of my favorite works who are by authors whom I don't agree with. Like you say, don't get entangled in their personal views. One of my favorite books is Ender's Game. If you've seen only the movie, then I'm sorry you only saw a tenth of the story.
You poor people.
So, and yet Orson Scott Card is himself very politically active and feels which I don't agree. He's part of Focus on the Family and events like that. And in a weird way, here's Ender's Game, which is about vulnerability, growing up, the tough choices you make, the toll your choices can take on you. And I don't think, and in a weird way, it is this surreal other entity from the author. And I will remember what I love about that story, because I didn't see his politics shining through in that story. I have seen his politics taking effect in other of his works, but not here. So
yeah,
that's
in the subsequent books, he kind of delves into that.
Actually, it was Keeper of the Earth series that I really felt like I was seeing more of his political views. But that story for me is a separate thing. By a similar notion, on YouTube, sometimes I see Jordan Peterson's talks about archetypes and psychology and understanding that, and I think it's very interesting. But YouTube, being YouTube, then thinks I want to hear about his political views, which I don't agree with. So, Yeah, there's another catch-22 here. I like his academic work. I don't really go with his political.
For me personally, it really depends on the artist, because there is definitely some that who have views that I do not agree with. However, they're harmless. They're not, trying to infiltrate the minds of the masses here. However, there's definitely people out there who I think who can be harmful. For example, like Rage Against the Machine. I just can't agree with their views. And while they are extremely talented musicians, and I will never deny that, I just don't think I can support them. And so that's why I made the conscious decision to not listen to their music, to not buy any of their merchandise, and just walk away. Essentially,
you should pirate it, and when they say, "Hey, you have to pay for that," you go, "Forget you! I won't do what you tell me."
For those who don't know, what's that?
I said, we're back to Rage Against the Machine.
Well,
they did it to themselves.
Pretty much, they did. Okay, so we got a question here from Magical Dude who says, "So who's wrong when things get misinterpreted, the audience or the writers?"
Which one screwed up?
It takes two people to miscommunicate.
Mm-hmm. So that's your answer? It's both?
Well, I guess the question... this is very hard to phrase. It may be misinterpreted, but is that always a bad thing?
No. Not always. Most of the time, probably, but not always.
Most of the time, probably. Okay, so that's why when the word blame is thrown out, so I want to clarify, it's not always a bad thing. But by the same token, the author could have done something better to convey the idea, possibly. The audience has its own biases and interpretations and may be closed off to alternate interpretations. That's another very human failing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do what you can to improve based on this, but don't take too much credit or don't beat yourself up for needless reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we got another one here from let's see here, Juan Penalazoa. Sorry for butchering that one. He said, "Did anyone else think that Sounds of Silence was Hasbro trying to sneak in freedom of speech? I mean, MLP is shown in China, and Kirins are from East Asian myth. Add an AJ, the American stereotype, and."
So let's go back to Big Mac in Brotherhood Social. that's the vibe I'm getting there. As far as I could tell, that episode had almost no deeper meaning other than you can either choose not to talk to each other when you have a disagreement, or you can work it out and have your bonds grow stronger still. And it really only showed it from one perspective, that being of Autumn Blaze, and then even then, the best argument they had for the other side of that, of distancing yourselves from people that make you angry, is that Kirins, when they get angry, they hold a mirror up to their name and become the Nirik and burn everything down. Which, if you're going to burn your house down every time you get angry, then you might need to find a way to check your anger management problems, and they seem to have gone with the simplest possible solution. So that was, as far as I could tell, that was what that episode was about. But because you bring that up about the origin of Kirins in mythology, and how they come from predominantly Asian cultures and how Asian politics tend to work out, now I'm forced to go to Twitter and find out who wrote that episode and ask them what they were doing, and the odds of, and then even then the odds of me getting an honest answer are pretty slim.
Mm. Okay, we have one here from Austin Ben.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. My bad.
Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about this, I think one thing to appreciate is that Kirin, or I believe it can be pronounced Quillen. that is not unique to China. It is also Japanese and many other East Asian
Japanese,
cultures.
Korean, Thai, Laotian.
It's
So
also
what you're saying is all Asian ponies look the same to you.
oh,
Let the mob begin.
let the mob begin.
Inappropriate. That is inappropriate. Inappropriate. That is not okay.
But if you're looking to say that this is a statement against China, you're not. Then it wouldn't be the right use of a mythical creature. You'd need something that was very much uniquely Chinese, and also nothing I witnessed reminded me of a Chinese culture. Thank goodness they didn't try for an accent or something like that.
It was very much generically Eastern Asian.
No, I don't even know about that. I didn't really.
I think they just wanted to, like, okay, what sort of mythical creature has an ungulate, a vaguely ungulate form, meaning having hooves, for those that, in case there's anybody in the audience that doesn't know. And they went around and found the Kirin, and they were like, okay, so it's a deer, it's a deer dragon, or in some cultures it's a horse dragon. And went from there. It was just something cool to put in. That's the vibe I got, but I have no way of confirming or denying that at the present moment.
Mm-hmm. So, and granted, I'm not versed enough in the cultures that perhaps there was something that stirred a greater connection with someone more knowledgeable about them, but I didn't get that impression, and I agree that Kirin are sometimes called the Oriental unicorn.
Mm-hmm. But so, Silver, didn't you know Kim Jong-il had a conversation with a Kirin?
Oh, well, that's part of the myth. If they appear in your home, that's a sign of good luck, or you're about to have
that's your in some legends, it's they only appear to you if you're a benevolent ruler, or if and in other legends, they only appear if you're an evil ruler, in which case they're going to kill you.
Okay, let's get to Austin's questions here before we call it. And just a simple question: I want to know your favorite MLP episode in terms of how it's written.
Oh man, there's a lot of them. Like, I freaking love this show. I think it's one of the best of all time.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, weren't you telling me that your favorite one was where Twilight got winged?
No, my favorite one was where you went back in the corner and put the dunce cap on.
Oh.
I'm sorry. No, that's the only episode I've only watched once. The rest of them I've seen at least 3 times. You know something? The Crystal Empire always has a special place in my heart.
For me, I would have to go with I can't remember the name of the episode, but I believe it was the season 6 finale, because I love the fact that it was basically the rejects of Equestria coming together to essentially save it, and Starlight was able to actually prove to herself that she has been reformed, because she. As DWK pointed out, she's been redeemed, but not so much reformed. She's not quite sure if she's actually changed or if just Twilight forced it on her. And to me, this was the episode where she proved to herself that, she has. So that one is going to have, as you say, Brawny, a special place in my heart. Silver?
Sisterhood Social.
Oh, wow.
It was an early one, but it's sort of the one that cemented that what I really praised about this. It is a story of which I can relate to all the characters on multiple parts, in both virtue and vice. I see Sweetie Belle's enthusiasm in wanting to be a part of things, but sometimes her clumsiness or unintentional mistakes. I see Rarity's territorialism and then guilt afterwards. I too work with that. I saw the antagonist switch and protagonist switch roles, as it was first you're rooting for Sweetie Belle, and then when she becomes angry and cold towards Rarity, now you're rooting for Rarity to mend the relationship. Applejack and Apple Bloom are being these very positive characters. It was one of the few times with Applejack talking to Rarity that the main six exchanged knowledge rather than all learning the lesson together.
And it was also very heartwarming too. It really tugged at the heartstrings there at the end.
Now, here's where Death of the Author can come in. This was one of the few non-Twilight episodes. She doesn't even appear. And so someone who's very protective of Twilight could say, you don't like it because Twilight, you like it because Twilight wasn't in there. He hates Twilight. And there I could say, no, that's not true. I just really like this episode. See, that's where people can assign meaning where it may not exist, or personal bias can influence interpretation.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to go ahead and call it there. But I just want to say, though, first of all, thanks to Silver and Brawny for doing this panel with me. I think I actually have a better understanding now of the topic. And from listening to you guys talk and exchange questions and ideas, this is my new thought with Death of the Author. It is okay. It is definitely fine. However, when it comes to like some of the topics that we brought up, you need to be able to point out when someone is just being crazy. Like example, like we did with Rage Against the Machine, and how it can definitely be beneficial, how someone's work can inspire you to create your own version of the story. But just be careful when someone is telling you what an episode is, and don't be afraid to question it if you got the completely wrong idea, like with Fame and Misfortune. Believe me, I know how much Larson did not like the episode. However, there was still some value in it. In fact, Silver, when you said that episode was a great demonstration of the pros and cons of this topic, a light bulb just really went off in my head going, oh my God, he's right. So I definitely did learn.
Say that again, slower.
Oh my God.
No,
right.
That's inappropriate.
Oh God, just so.
I'm going to take that away from you, Silver.
You're welcome to come out and do it, but you have to keep social distancing.
I'll tell you what, I'll do it
6 feet of my soundboard.
I'll do it wearing my King Sombra armor so I don't touch you.
So it can definitely be a good thing, it can definitely be a bad thing. Just really take time to think about the interpretation and if it adds up.
Actually, after listening to you guys talk about this for, almost 2 hours, I'm getting the feeling that Cruizer had a report due on this, and he's using us to...
I was gonna use the metaphor of there's a video floating around the internet of this crow going back and forth between two cats and just pecking them in the butt and then flying away, and eventually the cats think each other are the one that's poking them, and they start fighting, and then the crow's like, yeah, fight. That's what Cruiser freaking did to us over here.
No, I was trying to learn, damn it.
Well, as long as it was entertaining, we all had fun.
Yes.
So I definitely learned something from this. Would you guys say that you've learned something as well?
Yeah. Interesting conversations.
Okay, what did you guys learn?
Well, there's the challenge of if a story can mean anything, does it mean nothing? That's a very thought-provoking point. And that at some point, maybe there does need to be someone does need to say, this was the intended hard truth. Now, work with that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, maybe don't accept it unquestionably, but factor it in.
Mm-hmm. And not to mention also the possibilities of being too vague. Brawny, how about you?
I learned that there are definitely some holes in my own way of thinking about this topic that I did not really have a good answer for, so I need to learn more about the topic myself.
That's one of the things about being a human. You are always learning. Even when you graduate high school or college, you're not done.
Nah, forget you, man. I graduated college for the sole purpose of being able to turn off my brain. How dare you?
You went to college to be a photographer. That was your biggest mistake ever.
And no, once you graduate high school, you've learned everything you need to know. College is just showing off.
I don't know. Going to college for photography could help you see the big picture.
Hold on. I have an answer for that. Where's that server mute button? No, kick.
All right.
Okay, yeah, we'll end it there on a very good pun. Thanks everyone for attending. I really appreciate it. And thank you also to Looney for setting up LooneyCon.
Yep. Thank you, Looney. Thanks for everyone coming out, and have a great day.
Oh, that turtle did nothing. If he was here, I'd tell him a thing or two.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh God, he's here! Run away!
Stay tuned for a panel, Death of the Admin.